Thank you for joining us. We are here today from Pennsylvania talking about the Priority Resource Inventory Map. Here in the room with me are Amanda Hasmeyer, retired State GIS Specialist, Marcy Dunn, the current State GIS Specialist, and myself, Gwendolyn Cruz, and I am the Planning Specialist for Pennsylvania. This document, and I'll show you that in a second, this document, the Priority Resource Inventory Map, was developed in response to the field's desire to spend more time in the field developing conservation plans and working on the planning process in the field with the customer, as opposed to spending time working on planning-related activities in the office on the computer. Denise Coleman, our state conservationist, developed a committee consisting of state leadership, state technical specialists, like the state soil scientists and the state agronomists, district conservationists, soil conservationists, and program assistants. The committee basically got together and looked into several ways to increase the amount of time that planners are in the field or to increase the efficiency of the planning process. And the Priority Resource Inventory is one of the products that came out of this committee. This is an example of the Priority Resource Inventory. This is in the format that a planner would have with them when they go out to meet with the client on the initial field visit. And this is basically the way the document would look when it's presented to the customer. NRC has developed the Priority Resource Inventory, which uses Esri ArcMap data layers to identify specific resource concerns present in the planning area that are of particular importance to Pennsylvania, and we're going to talk about those in a little bit. The purpose of the Priority Resource Inventory is to ensure that all priority resources are clearly identified by the planner at the beginning of the planning process, using a landscape planning approach while supporting planning and management discussions with the customer. Prior to the development of the Priority Resource Inventory, planners conducted a potentially time-consuming in-office resource inventory consisting of multiple information sources before going to the field for the initial meeting with the client. The results of this inventory were typically conveyed to the client verbally and to varying degrees of success. So the Priority Resource Inventory is designed to support planning and management discussions with the customer while ensuring priority resources are clearly identified at the beginning of the planning process, and a landscape planning approach is utilized by the planner. The Priority Resource Inventory enables new or inexperienced planners to quickly and efficiently focus on high-risk concerns. This allows planners to look at things consistently across the state and consistently evaluate the Pennsylvania landscape. And this is, I have to say, one of the main benefits that we're seeing right now is the increase in efficiency and consistency with which all planners, but I think more of a greater concern for us right now is new planners are evaluating resource concerns on the landscape across the state, because we had a pretty significant turnover of staff recently. And we needed a way to quickly and efficiently teach planners how to evaluate the landscape, regardless of what county or area they're working in. And the other thing I wanted to comment on is this document was rolled out at the beginning of fiscal year 17. So planners have been using it for coming up on 9 months to a year right now. And we sent out a survey about 3 months ago asking planners what they thought about this product, what they liked, what they didn't like. We made a couple changes to make the process a little bit more efficient and focus on the toolkit environment, which Marcy is going to talk about in a little bit. But overall, I think the planners had a positive response to it. The new planners really felt that it helped them quickly and efficiently identify problems in the field. They liked the fact that it was a concise document to use when they were talking with the customers about the problems or potentials for improvement, even if there isn't necessarily an existing problem, but there's an area where gully erosion is potentially more likely. They liked being able to direct that conversation at the beginning of their initial field visit. So I think overall there were positive responses. And I'm going to switch it over to Amanda Hasmeyer, who is going to talk about how the template is organized and how you work within that a little bit. And a little bit later, Marcy Dunn is going to talk about, is actually going to walk you through the process of using Toolkit to set up the map and get you to that final product. So Amanda.
So good morning. The organization of this template really is in three parts, the map in the middle, but there's a series of sections on the right as well as the left. So on the right is 2 blocks, block 1 and 2, that are the resource concerns, not acreage specific. So this allows the user to say, are you in a high quality watershed? Are you in an exceptional value watershed? Click on and off, and you can say yes or no, but not necessarily display it on the map, because we cannot really display every single layer that we'd like to see on one particular map. So for example, if you are implementing practices that will benefit water quality anywhere within the planning unit, it will result in an overall water quality improvement for the whole watershed. So again, are you in a high quality watershed? Yes or no? Then on the second block, we have the species of concerns and for Pennsylvania. And as Marcy will explain later, some of these don't apply in all the counties, but we included them here. And so one of the species is this northern long-eared bat. It really covers all of Pennsylvania, but is it particular to your county, to your tract of land? And so it's yes or no. And here on the left side is the legend for the map. And the legend is going to expand and reduce depending on what is going to be shown. The next slide will actually show all of those resource concerns. But in this case here, we have an example that is based, the example here is showing that implementing practices to reduce runoff of nutrients and pesticides from a high runoff soil will have more impact on soils with high runoff potential than on soils with low runoff potential. So you can see that we have a high runoff soils that are showing. And the other item is, on this particular example, are the hydric soils. You're going to see hydric soils on the legends pretty much on every single tract of land that we have here, but you might not see all of the other resource concerns that we're going to show. There's other environmental layers, such as water, ag-impaired streams, that kind of thing, that will appear or not appear depending on what's on your particular land. So here's the legend slide that is just a slide presentation of what is the extent of those layers that we need to be looking at. And most of them are really in group layers for the GIS portion, but of significance is not only the hydric layers, but the concentrated flow accumulation. And Mark is going to explain that more in detail. But then we have those watershed types. Remember that if you have ag-impaired watershed, you're either in or out, which is going to affect how you might be planning that particular tract. And then on that third column is that species of concern. So you either have it or you don't. And below the species of concerns are these specialty layers that we've developed here for Pennsylvania, the high runoff soils as well as those leaching soils for Pennsylvania. And if you noticed in the previous example, there were no leaching soils on that particular tract.
Thanks, Amanda. So the priority resource layers that Amanda just talked about are basically data layers that were developed with input from the state technical committee members. And one of the things that I really like about this is these are all layers that were developed based on scientific information, research that was conducted in the field, inputs from different modeling programs, and everything has been peer reviewed. So it's all coming from vetted data, basically. The priority resource inventory guidance document, which I'm going to switch over to in a minute, shows you the information source. So where are we getting the information used to develop that actual data layer? We talk a little bit about why the resource is a priority in Pennsylvania, and that can be useful for both new planners, a new resource concern that we've added, or a new priority resource concern that we've added to the map at some point maybe in the future, and also helpful to educate your clients about why that priority resource is actually a priority in Pennsylvania. And then there's also a small section that talks about some really basic generic conservation practices that would typically show an improvement in that resource layer in the field. So I am going to switch over to that if you bear with me for a minute. All right. So this is the Priority Resource Guidance document. It's about a 7-page document that we put together so that there is a consistent background information for each of the layers. And I'm not going to read through all of this. This is available if you are interested in it. It is located on our Field Office Technical Guide. But as you can see, this is the background information for the layers that Amanda just identified. We have the exceptional value and high quality waters, and we talk about what the data source is in the first paragraph, and we talk about why it's a priority. 303D, ag impaired for nutrients and sediment. The priority watersheds, and this is put together from the USGS SCARA data. We have brook trout greatly reduced or naturally reproducing brook trout. Then we get into the priority species. And some of these species are listed because they are either state or federally threatened or endangered. There's also several species, which I will show in a minute, that are developed or identified through a wildlife initiative. So we have the bob turtle and the Indiana bat. Those are both federally listed species. We have the Massasauga rattlesnake, which is also a federally listed species, as is the northern long-eared bat. Then we get down here to the cerulean warbler and the golden wing warbler. These are both species that have been identified through an initiative, and we're working with them because they've been targeted due to declining habitat or declining species range. We come down here to soils, so we talk about the hydric soils. As Amanda mentioned, due to the sensitivity of hydric soils and their frequency in the Pennsylvania landscape, we do show all of the hydric soil breakdown except for 0% hydric. So even if you have a 1% chance of having hydric soil on your farm, you're going to see that in the data layer. We have high runoff potential soils, high leaching potential soils, and then the concentrated flow layer. So let me leave this and jump back to the PowerPoint presentation. And here's an example just so you can see how the different data layers cover the entire state. This is an example of the exceptional value and high quality watershed that's covering Pennsylvania. So this layer is available at the state level, and Marcy is also working on breaking the data layers into field team or county specific layers so that the data is a little bit easier to bring up, and there's not quite as much of a lag time when you're working on reloading something in Toolkit. This is one of the layers that we developed, I think, fairly early on, and we had been using to assign financial assistance ranking points. So basically, if we were working with a client in one of the watersheds, so let's say we were working in an exceptional value watershed, that customer, if agreeing to implement certain practices, would get additional points on the ranking, basically enabling them to rise to the top and get a contract because they are dealing with more sensitive resources maybe than their neighbors who are not in an exceptional value watershed. So we had been using it for program financial assistance standpoint, and we are trying to refocus things back to the planning level, the initial planning level, the resource concerns, the identification of problems that are in the landscape that will then potentially translate into some sort of financial assistance benefit. The other thing I really like about this is something that would fit in really well with the Clean Water Act. So when you're going through your planning process and you're identifying the special environmental concerns that might be present on a land unit, these data layers are really, really helpful for things like that. So this, like I said, would tie into the special environmental Clean Water Act section of the CPA 52. This is the 303D Ag Impaired Streams. This shows you how this lays out across the state. This is something, as are many of the layers, they're constantly changing based on new data that is coming into the system. So this is something that our GIS staff, which right now is consisting of only Marcy, needs to spend a lot of time every year making sure that this data is up to date. So while this mapping product does make things a lot more consistent across the state and efficient for the planner in the field, there is a requirement of increased workload at the state level to make sure that the state GIS specialist has the time and it's identified as a priority by leadership for that person to spend the time updating these data layers so that they are current. And that's something that is a continuing workload for most of the data layers to make sure that they're reflecting what is going on in the environment. They're not a static data layer that's frozen in time over a period of years. It has to be regularly updated. This is an example of the cerulean warbler data layer. So it shows you where they're showing up, their habitat range across the state landscape. And as I said, this is an initiative, a species that has been identified through an initiative. And it's part of the nationally funded Regional Conservation Partnership Program. And for this particular species, it's a partnership between the Appalachian Mountains joint venture of the American Bird Conservancy and the NRCS. So this is just an example of how some of our partnership efforts can be reflected through this map. This is the high leaching soils, how they lay out across the state. So as you can see, there is variability across the state. Some areas you have a lot more, some areas you have less. And because of the amount of animal agriculture we have in Pennsylvania, manure application and nutrient management is a really, really sensitive issue. Being in the Chesapeake Bay, we have a lot of watersheds that are really sensitive. So this is something, as our high runoff soils, that are things that we really need to be paying a lot of attention to in Pennsylvania. Then we get to the concentrated flow accumulation, and this layer was basically developed in 2006 in response to findings through the Food Security Act compliance checks that we were seeing that there was an increased amount of gully erosion in crop fields across the state, and it was pretty consistent across the state. So we basically felt that it wasn't that one or two planners were looking at things maybe erroneously, and it wasn't that it was a specific cropping system in a specific section of the state, but rather the state soil scientists and the state agronomists went out and looked at things across the field. They looked at rainfall data, they looked at cropping practices across the state, and then they actually went out and did some field verification to figure out what was going on in the areas where these gullies were popping up. And we found that due to a change in cropping practices, so moving from more tillage-based practices to no-till, going from narrow contour strips to wider contour strips, moving away from the contour, that the fields were more prone to erosion due to potential compaction in the very, very top layer of that soil profile. And then we've also seen that it seems that the storm intensity has been changing. We're getting more intense storms, and the time that those storms are occurring as opposed to happening in the summer, they're maybe more likely to happen in the February, March, April timeframe when you have less cover on the field. So we spent some time looking into that, and basically so we figured out one of the reasons for why this increased erosion was happening, but then we decided that we needed to help the field more efficiently identify potential locations for gully erosion, and that's where we came up with the concentrated flow or flow accumulation layer that Marcy Dunn is going to talk about.
So what we used to develop this layer was just Pennsylvania LIDAR data. It was the DEM, Digital Elevation Model, and spatial analyst tools in ArcGIS. And when you have a DEM, it's a raster data, so it's all little pixels. And what the flow accumulation does, it calculates the flow direction. So if water lands on that cell, that pixel, which way is it going to flow? So it calculates the flow direction, and as you can see, every pixel would get an arrow of which way it would flow, and then it calculates the number of each pixel where the flow is going to go. So each then raster cell comes up with a number to give it a direction and how many other cells are flowing into that one cell next to it or around it. So cells with a high flow accumulation are areas where the concentrated flow is going, and that's where we identified, well, maybe we can use that to help the field identify potential gullies. You know, the acreage of the farm can be fairly large, so a field employee is not able to walk every single acre, but if we gave them this flow accumulation, where the flow may go, it may help them to identify what areas of that field they need to visit and walk to see if there is a gully there. So we did this at a state level. We did it by county, so then each office was given their county data to be used with the priority resource map, and if they wanted to use it outside of the priority resource map. So this is just a picture. You can see on the left side, it's just showing you the ortho. It's a 2015 ortho of an area. On the right is what it looks like with the concentrated flow. We color-coded our pixels. Anything with a value of 1,000 we noticed was really a stream channel in some cases, or it definitely had flow there. So we left them in black. The red are the potential areas where you might see a gully forming, where you need to look in the field to see if one is there. And you can see in the image, you can find some places without the lines on the map that are possible gullies out there. So if the field employee didn't look at the map, the aerial image before going out, but they looked at their flow accumulation, they may find them a lot easier to where areas needed to be checked. So I'm just going to show you, this is a blank priority resource inventory template. So it shows you how Amanda talks about your legend, and then in the middle will be the map and your layers on the right side. So I'm just going to take you out of here and do a live demo and show you how we can create the priority resource map. I'm going to do it from Toolkit. NRCS employees are all familiar with Toolkit. They work in Toolkit. So, and we want to save it in the Toolkit folder so we know it goes with that customer. We have our GIS template. We don't want to open that one. What we wanted to do was use our Add Change Templates button in Toolkit and bring in this priority resource inventory template. Each county has their own template because then the speed of opening it and using it is a little bit faster than giving them one template for the whole state. I already have it opened at the bottom, so I'm just going to bring it up. And I'll walk you through. The first thing I did was turn off our Toolkit layers, the layers such as the case PLU, the active PLU legacy. Again, the idea was to do this before you go out to the farm. If you currently have a conservation plan, you can bring in your cons plan layer, your fields for the plan. That's fine. In this case, I'm going to pretend it's a new track, and I'm going to search for that track and create my priority resource inventory map to take with me to the field. So I'm just going to select by attribute, and I'm going to use the CLU from FSA that we have. And I'm going to do track number equals, and in this case, I'll enter my number. And I'll hit OK. It does highlight, so the next thing I'll do is I'm going to zoom to that selected feature. The next step we have our field employees do is export this as its own shapefile so that they don't see all the other CLU lines around it because the map does get busy to begin with. So I'm just going to right-click and do Data, Export Data. And we suggested to our employees to save it in the Customers folder in Resource Maps. So it's going to be C, Users, your name is where the Customer folder goes, Customer Files, and I'm going to put in Resource Maps, and I'm going to call it Field. I have one there from another example. I'm going to just overwrite it. You can put the track number on it. That's fine. You can name it what you wish. And hit OK. And I'm going to add it to the map layer. So I'll turn the CLU off. I'm left with my field. Again, I'm going to make them a no fill. I'm going to make the width a little bigger, and I'll make them yellow. Also at this time, I can scroll down and I can turn on my ortho image that is at the bottom. Okay, and I'm going to scroll back up, and I'm going to start going through those layers that had been talked about when we showed a screenshot in the legend. First, our hydrography layers. Do I have an ag-impaired stream? And there is one down here on the map. So I'm going to leave that layer turned on. Are there any other streams? There's a smaller piece down in the left corner. So I'll leave those on. And there's no water, there are water bodies right here if they come up. They are not showing up. So I'll just turn that off. I don't want to clutter my legend with data layers that aren't really going to be displayed. My next thing that I come across is the concentrated flow. So I'm just going to turn that on. Of course, that's going to be on every map. It's going to be certain areas. And our hydric soils. That's going to be everywhere. As Gwendolyn mentioned, we did take off our not hydric. There's no need to display them. We think every person can assume if there's not a hydric rating, the soils are not hydric. So we figured there was no need to show them on the map.
And we're pausing right now because I'm serious that there's a little bit of a delay between what we're seeing on our screens and what is showing up on the recording. So you should be seeing right now the concentrated flow, and then we just saw the hydric data pop up.
So the next thing I'm going to go through is our watershed data. So I need to check watershed types do they display. I'm going to look to see if there's a high quality watershed. And there's not, since one has not appeared. Is there an exceptional value watershed? Again, there is not one. Ag impaired, it should show up because remember we do have an ag impaired stream that's coming onto this track. So now what I want to do is I want to remember that, but I don't want to leave it displayed because it's just adding to every other data layer on the map. So I'm going to remember there's an ag impaired watershed there and turn it off. Is it a brook trout greatly reduced? And there is. Part of the farm has a brook trout greatly reduced watershed on it. Again, I'm going to turn that off, but keep that in my memory, or write it down if you need to. Is this one of our 2017 priority watersheds? It also is. Now again, Gwendolyn mentioned those watersheds, as it's coming up, are determined using different data layers, mostly the USGS Sparrow model data for nitrogen and phosphorus. And is it a trout natural reproduction watershed? It is not. So I do have 3 watersheds. I have an ag impaired, a brook trout, and a priority watershed. So then we're going to go to our species of concern. I know from what county we're currently doing this example in that bog turtle is not in this county, so I will not check it. When we give our templates to the field, they are taken out. If that species is not in that county, we do not have it in the list of species of concern because they don't need to worry about that. So I know bog turtle is not in this county. I know Indiana bat is not in this county. I also know the Massasauga rattlesnake is not in this county. Cerulean warbler, I'm not quite sure. I am going to check it to see if it comes up. And it does not. So this is not cerulean warbler. Is it golden wing? and it is not also. So I have no species of concern, except the northern long-eared bat. There's not a data layer for northern long-eared bat because it is across the whole state. Do I have high runoff soils? I do, so I'm going to leave them turned on. And the next one, I'm going to see if I have leaching soils. I do. There is a small area around the ag-impaired stream and over by this stream, so I'm going to leave those on. So my next option is to make the layout. Now, in a regular toolkit folder, you would hit your Map Products button and put the folder name and all the data layers that come up. But for this template, all we want to do is go down and hit our Layout View button and switch over to our layout. Because since this template's been set up for the field, the layout is already set up also. It comes up with the legend, your field, our ag-impaired stream, our other stream that's on there, our runoff and leaching soils, our concentrated flow, and our hydrant. The other thing I might want to do is to show a little bit more around the farm. I might want to zoom out a little bit. I could type in a scale, or I can just use your fixed zoom out button in ArcMap. So that gives you a little bit of a more idea of what's around that farm. Now we need it to remember, or we could have went back to the layout originally. The only species we had was a northern long-eared bat. That is already checked in every template for every county because it appears in every county. So my other thing I need to do is, since they're not showing up in the legend, I can highlight this X, and I want to copy and paste it because I need to put X's in those watershed boxes that I needed. I can either copy and paste the X, or I can use my text button and add an X. Again, I'm just going to paste it because remember, we had a priority watershed, we had a brook trout watershed, and if I paste one more and then drag it up, we were in an ag-impaired watershed for nutrient and sediment. So I'm leaving the watersheds that were not on this track without an X in the box and putting an X in the box that was. And same thing with our species of concern. What else I would do is I would click on county, and I would, if you double click, you can type in the county you're in. I can also click on name and date and type in my name, customer's name, and today's date that the map is being done. If you want a track number, there's no problem with putting a track number on it. We just don't suggest it if you don't want to put it on, but we had told our field they can type track or they can put it after the customer's name. At this point, they would save the project, give it a new name because you don't want to overwrite that template. So they would save it as a new name in the ArcMap project in the customer's folder. What they would also do would export the map as a PDF into the resource maps folder. If I do File, Export Map, browse to that same location where our customer's folder is, and here, if I want to save it with the track name, track number, I can. And just hit save. So that map will now be in the folder.
Thanks, Marcy. So as you can see, there is a lot of data that goes into this. There's a lot of information that's displayed in what we think is a very efficient, concise, and consistent way. One of the things I wanted to mention is we've been really working with our field planners to get them to leave the symbology in the format using the type of symbology that was developed by our GIS specialists to hopefully save a little bit of time. And we also think that the development of this tool has been fairly straightforward and simple within the toolkit environment. thanks to the background GIS data developed at the state level. This is something that we think is transferable to other states, and it can be customized to be specific to whatever state that you happen to be working in. The other thing I wanted to comment, we did do a little bit of research or just looking in to make sure that this map product can be used on different types of land uses. So the example that Marcy went through and the example that I used at the beginning of the presentation focused on crop, pasture, and farmstead land uses, which are the predominant land uses we see with the majority of our customers. We also have a lot of forest land in Pennsylvania, and we have some urban land. So this example here is looking at urban land. This is close to, I think, the Philadelphia region. And I will say that it is a little bit more limited right now in urban areas just because we have not identified a lot of priorities that are applicable to urban areas. There's not a lot of species that are going to be applicable in an urban area because of the development. You're going to have some impaired watersheds, but they may not necessarily be ag impaired, so that might be a limitation. You are, of course, going to have hydric, high leaching, and high runoff potential soils, as well as the potential for gully erosion. So those are definitely applicable in an urban area, and as we move forward and potentially do more work with urban customers, we might find that we need to develop different layers that are more applicable to that land use and that environment. I also want to show you the forest example. Bring that up. So this is an example of forest land, which we have quite a bit of in Pennsylvania. And as you can see the resource concerns, if there are any species concerns, if there are any watersheds of potential or particular concern, as well as hydric, high runoff, high leaching, and concentrated flow accumulation. And I will point out that both of these map templates you might notice look a little bit different in the left-hand column under the legend section, where there's a lot more options showing up under legend that do not have check marks next to them. This was our original version of the map in a PDF form that we got a lot of comments from the field. They wanted it to be more closely tied in with the toolkit environment, and we wound up kind of disregarding that PDF document to go with a cleaner, more integrated document within the toolkit environment. So I think that's all we have. I wanted to thank you for your time. If you have any questions, let me go back to the PowerPoint. I have our contact information here. You can contact either Marcy or myself. If you have GIS-specific questions, I recommend you contact Marcy because I am not nearly as competent of a user within the GIS environment as she is. And then if you have questions about how it relates specifically to planning, of course, you can contact me. So thank you very much for your time, and we look forward to hearing from you in the future. Have a good day.